house, so let's go ahead and bring him on.
Ray
I think
Hernandez is in the house, and you know, well, we can all talk about Ray, but he has such a dramatic story of how he came to UFOs and how he went beyond UFOs. You know, so Ray, we want to see your face.
Okay, here we go. Let me see.
On, Ray.
Okay, here we go.
Hey,
I look like
Wow,
Santa Claus.
there you
how you doing,
go.
brother?
Quantum Santa Claus there. Yeah.
North Pole.
Yes, I'm matching Dr. Tom Campbell.
It's good to
Well,
see you, man.
yeah.
Good to
Are
see
you?
everyone's healthy.
Yeah, are you going to go beyond where you went before, right? Right. I mean, I have to say, Ray was a lawyer, didn't know anything about anything, and boom, one day, well, it's a whole story. His wife, and then him, and then the download, and then he had synchronicities, near-death experience. I'm just fast tracking it all so we can get to you, but it just blew open his mind to say, he's dedicating his life to this, hooked up with Edgar Mitchell, wrote his first book with a bunch of other people, Rudy Shield, Beyond UFOs, and now he's really taking us to the next level where he's become one of the people saying, it's all consciousness, and what does that mean? How does that evolve us, and who are we really, and what is this out there? So is that a little bit of what you're going to be talking about, Ray?
Yes, I can talk about the new book. I've already, I guess, presented to many of the members of Neil's group about my history of how I got here as an individual, which is it's unbelievable. There's no
It's
other way to
dramatic.
describe it. Yeah.
It's a movie. It should be a movie. Yes.
And it was an experience. Well, we are doing a documentary. We've been filming for 5 years,
Wow.
and it's going to parallel the new book. We've interviewed more than 30 PhD academics and medical doctors, and close to 70 experiencers of the contact modalities. These are individuals that have had 3 or more different experiences via the contact modalities. For example, people have had NDEs, they've had OBEs, they've seen deceased people, they've seen UFOs. I guess our mutual friend Preston Dennett is a classic case. He's had all of the above except an NDE. So our book is going to be literally, actually it's going to be 4 books, 4 volumes. And volume 1 and 2 are theoretical, and volume 3 and 4 are experiential. It's going to be the testimony of these major individuals. So I'll stop to take a breath here.
Yeah. Do you have a PowerPoint, or are you just going to talk?
No, what I can do is I could show what the front cover of our book is going to look like, and the topics, the various topics. But before we get into that, I just want to present to the audience members that I've called down huge UAPs. Okay, not these.
Ray, just real quick, could you turn up your volume?
Yes. Okay. Hold on one second. Volume. Testing. How's that?
More, please.
Okay. How's that? Testing.
Sounds the same. Maybe you can do it in Zoom. You know where the microphone is? There's a little up arrow.
Yes, I see it there.
Audio settings.
Okay. Audio settings.
Yep, and then microphone volume.
Okay, microphone volume. How's that
There
now?
we go. Perfect.
All right, fantastic. Okay, and just for individuals that do not know me, do not know my story, an energy being appeared in my living room to my wife and my daughter, and to my wife first. And then she went upstairs to call me because she had been praying all night to the Virgin Mary of Mexico, La Virgen de Guadalupe. And that morning, this energy being appeared, and she went upstairs to call me because to her it was an angel. And then I went downstairs with her at 6 o'clock in the morning because she had been praying all night because our dog was totally paralyzed. And we were going to be euthanizing her later in the afternoon. And so this energy being appeared. My wife disappeared in front of me. The dog disappeared. This being put me to sleep. And when I woke up an hour later, the dog was completely healed, running around the entire neighborhood. And my wife was saying, hallelujah, hallelujah, the angels cured her, the angels cured her. And my background, I went to Cornell for a master's degree. I went to University of California, Berkeley for a PhD, and then I became an attorney. So total atheist, material rationalist, and this was like an atom bomb exploding in my head. And then my wife began to pray at night, and these huge UAPs, it's another terminology for UFOs, would appear, these very large objects. And then I tried to do it, and it happened. The first time I tried it, it was this huge object the size of a football stadium appeared right on top of my next door neighbor's house, literally 30 feet away from me. And that was witnessed by my daughter, who was 10 years old at the time, and 3 adult friends of mine. And that lasted more than an hour. There was telepathic communication that took place, holographic projections, and I won't go into the details of that. And then I began to have a series of nonstop paranormal experiences, including out-of-body experiences, seeing shadow beings, getting physics downloads, other types of downloads of information. I had 3 near-death related type of experiences, which gave me spirituality. And that, again, that was a very complicated process, which I won't go into the details of it. And then how my research part came about was I was driving my car in the middle of a traffic jam, and I was taken out of body to another multidimensional reality where I was taught the nature of our reality, the relationship between consciousness and what I now call the contact modalities, all the different paranormal ways that humans are piercing the veil of our reality and having contact with non-human intelligence. And I was shown that that all of these experiences, i.e. NDEs, OBEs, UAP contact, people that see ghosts and spirits, hallucinogenic journeys, channeling, remote viewing, et cetera, that all these experiences are actually part of one phenomenon. And they need to be studied as one phenomenon. And the main reason is because all of them involve what is called a manipulation of space-time. So, and then that night, that evening when I got home from work, Mary Rodwell sent me an email. I had never communicated with her before. She was responding to an email that I had sent her 6 months earlier. So on the day of that experience, she said, "Dear Ray, I'm sorry I'm responding to an email that you had sent me 6 months ago, but it's just popped up on my computer today." So it was held up in cyberspace for 6 months. So if any of you are going to be seeing Mary Rodwell in the very near future, say, "Look, Ray Hernandez told us this crazy story. Is it true or not?" You know, and she'll tell you that yes, it's very, very true. And we spoke until 1:30 in the morning, my time, Eastern Standard Time. And then I said, "Look, Mary, I got to go to work tomorrow." And we agreed to communicate later. But then the very next day, there's 24 hours after that OBE experience while I was driving my car, I got a phone call from this emeritus professor of astrophysics at Harvard University, Dr. Rudy Shields. And I had no idea who this man was. And he's calling me at 8:30 in the morning. And what had happened was that Mary had sent him a detailed chronology of my experiences that I told her. And so he wanted to talk to me because my experience dealt with consciousness and physics and cosmology. And that's what his interest is in. And then he, in turn, spoke with me for about 90 minutes. And then he gave me Edgar Mitchell's telephone number. I called him later on that afternoon. Edgar Mitchell invited me to his home. So within 48 hours of this experience, I was at the home of Edgar Mitchell, and he lived an hour and a half away from me. And it was at the home of Edgar Mitchell that this organization, which eventually was called the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences, began. And then we then invited Rudy Shields and Mary Rodwell for us to become the co-founders of that organization. And then we invited many PhD academics and UFO researchers, Barbara Lamb, Denise Stoner, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, the late Dr. Leo Sprinkle, Kathleen Martin, and several others to work with us to undertake the world's first comprehensive academic statistical research study of UFO contact experiences. These are individuals like myself that had seen a being, an intelligence, and have had UFO contact experiences. And we spent 9 months developing the research for that. We then developed 3 surveys. We administered in multiple languages. And in the English language alone, we collected responses from more than 4,300 individuals from over 125 countries. And needless to say, our research data pretty much contradicted what is circulating in the field of mainstream materialist ufology. It was the total opposite of what's circulating out there at these UFO conferences. And why? Because no one has ever done this study before, this comprehensive academic statistical research study. And again, this was done with PhD academics together with people that had their boots on the ground researching UFO abductees and conductees for numerous years. Leo Sprinkle, for example, was working in that field for 40 years. Same thing with Barbara Lamb, Mary Rodwell for at least 30 years, Kathleen Martin, again, another 30 years. So these weren't just naive people. These are people that have been working in this arena for many years. All we did was just combined it with the PhD academics. So we made it academic and scientific, and we managed to publicize our data in 2 peer-reviewed academic journals. And we published an 820-page book titled Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. And if anybody wants to receive roughly half of our book, the most important sections that dealt with the data, I'm giving it away for free. Just send me an email to info, I-N-F-O, @experiencer.org. That's info, I-N-F-O, @experiencer.org. Right there, someone just typed it up on the chat box. And so the reason I pushed that study to begin with was, here I was in this out-of-body experience in 2013. This is May of 2013, where I was shown all this information, that it's all one phenomenon. But yet the folks in ufology, they say, what the hell does NDEs have to do with UFOs? What does OBEs have to do with UFOs? Okay, what does channeling have to do with UFOs, et cetera? Well, what did we discover in our research study of 4,300 people? What we discovered was that this phenomenon, while has a physical component to it, okay, you see a perceived physical object in the sky, you see a physical being in front of you. Like in my case, it was an energy being, which was multiple colored, semi-translucent, that totally controlled my consciousness, made my wife disappear, our dog, and totally healed our dog, who we were going to be euthanizing later that afternoon. So while it is a physical phenomenon, the overwhelming majority of the experiences that these people were having can be called paranormal in nature. For example, 80% of these people were having out-of-body experiences. That's a huge percent, okay? 37% had near-death experiences, okay? Orbs, 60% had seen orbs, okay? Deceased people, again, it was like 67% saw what is commonly called a ghost or a spirit. You name the paranormal experience, these people were having it in very large percentages. So that was one of our major research findings. And that also brought the hypothesis that these experiences need to be studied as one phenomenon. Why? Because the experiencers were having all of these experiences. Okay, you just don't see a UFO. No, you're having. Once you see a UFO, like in my case, boom, you get activated. Okay, and you begin having all of these experiences via what I call the contact modalities. And that's a term that I coined in 2013 when I wrote a paper for the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation on our website. It was titled The Quantum Hologram, Theory of Consciousness, and the Contact Modalities. Okay, so the experiencers themselves demonstrated that it needs to be studied as one. So this is not just theory, okay? It's also practice via the experiencer. Our approach always was that the experiencer holds the key to be able to begin to understand what is consciousness, what is the nature of our reality. If you just deal with pure philosophy, the philosophy of the mind, okay, and study idealism, like many of these scholars that are pure philosophers, you're never going to have a true understanding of what is consciousness. The other approach is a physicist approach. You could, approach it as via quantum physics, and just like the early developers of quantum physics conclude that yes, consciousness is primary. Okay, but you talk to the people that have had major contact experiences. And again, we talked about our friend Preston Dennett, but our book has over 70 of these people. They will tell you, yes, consciousness is primary. Okay, our reality, what we think it is not the real reality. We're actually inside a greater reality. Yes, Lilo, the title of the book is Beyond UFOs, the Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. And as I said before, you don't have to buy the book. I'm giving you more than half of the book for free to send me an email to info@experiencer.org. So anyway, the reason why we did that initial study on UFO contact experiencers was because there was zero statistical data on the phenomenon. Kathleen Martin, who was a member of our research committee, she and Denise Stoner, who was also a member of our research committee, they did a study several years before where they administered 50 questions to 50 abductees. Okay, very, very limited. Okay, one of the research findings that we found was that 2/3 of the people that took our surveys had seen a UFOs, had seen a non-human intelligence, but they never had an abduction. Okay, so all these people that just focus on abductions, this, abductions that, abductions everywhere, they're missing 2/3 of the people. And we also determined that the people that had an abduction, okay, 70% of these people now call themselves contactees and not abductees. Why? Because overall, initially, all the people who took our survey, 37% viewed their experiences as negative. Okay. Why? Because of the ontological shock. All of a sudden, you're like me, you're living your life normally, and there's an energy being appeared in your living room. Okay. And it wasn't for my wife, viewing it as angelic and praying all night and calling it down. If I didn't have that experience, I might have been traumatized by that experience. And that was a positive experience. The other people that have had experiences that are frightening. But over time, the 37% was reduced to less than 5%. Over time. Why? Because we found out that the vast majority of these individuals were having multiple contact experiences. Over 40% of these individuals were having more than 20 experiences. The more experiences you had, the more positive you viewed your experiences. Why? Because your perception of the experience changed over time, and your actual experience changed over time. For the people that have had abductions, they might have had an experience where they were paralyzed, they were having a medical inspection by these short beings, and but yet towards the end of their experiences, they're communicating with these energy beings. People viewed them as angels, angelic. They're being brought to the spirit world, shown what the afterlife is like Whitley Strieber. Now he's communicating with his deceased wife. Initially, Whitley Strieber viewed his experiences as horrible, totally negative experiences. Okay. Now he prays every night to these beings, giving them thanks for totally transforming him, for giving him spirituality, okay, for making him the individual that he is now. So Whitley Strieber initially was in this negative light of an abductee. Now he's Mr. Love and Light, okay? But that is the common example of people that took our surveys, okay? So one major finding was that these experiences were perceived by the overwhelming majority as highly positive. Not initially, but highly positive, okay? And we asked that question of positive, negative, or neutral in 25 different questions. Also, we asked open-ended questions where they got to write out the details to that question of positive, negative, and neutral. We even asked it for the different types of beings that people were seeing, whether it was positive, negative, or neutral. But I won't go into those details. The second major finding was that these experiences were primarily psychic, paranormal experiences, and not necessarily physicalist, okay? That was the vast majority of the experiences. Number three, these experiences dramatically transformed these individuals for the positive. All of a sudden, people became less materialistic, more spiritual, more consciously aware. Okay, they became vegetarians. They ecologically friendly. They became much more spiritual. They weren't atheists anymore. Money was not important, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that parallels the people that have had near-death experiences. So that was a major, major finding, that these experiences were just like near-death experiences. The people evolve and transform in radical ways. And the fourth major finding was that these experiences involve a manipulation of space-time. That means that these experiences need to be seen as consciousness-based phenomena, okay, as interdimensional phenomena, okay? And I won't go into the details. If people have questions, they could ask me later on. So the reason why we wanted to do this study first was because we had zero data about the UFO contact phenomenon. All you had at these UFO conferences were David Jacobs saying he's never met anyone that's had a positive UFO contact experience. Never. I never met anyone that had a positive experience. Bud Hopkins, the same thing. You know, I've never met anyone that had a positive experience. And all of these abduction people talking about how horrible the experience is. I think I might have lost you. Do you guys still hear me? Hello? I seem to have lost, I can't see my picture here. Maybe I did something. Okay, here I am. Sorry, I apologize. All right. So we didn't have any data. There was very little understanding of what is a UFO contact experience, okay? Now we do have that data, and it totally is different from what people perceive it to be, at least on the internet, okay? And on these UFO conferences. Now a lot of experiencers are beginning to talk at these UFO conferences, and they're giving a totally different perspective of what the phenomenon is all about. So what I realized at that point was, yes, my experience that I had, that out-of-body experience, and how the synchronicity of how the organization, the Dr. Mitchell Free Foundation, was formed. It was orchestrated, okay? Just like all of my experiences, these were sequential. Just like how they gave me spirituality, it was through a series of NDE experiences. And I'll just give you what happened at the last 3 days of this. The last 3 days was that on December 21st, 2012, I was with my daughter, the pediatrician's office. All of a sudden comes out a robotic voice. Excuse me, doctor, have you ever heard the term near-death experiences? It's a phenomenon that you need to know about. And I've just finished reading approximately 300 books on this phenomenon over the last 4 months, and many of them written by medical doctors such as yourself. So I was saying, what the hell is happening? Where did this voice come from? You know, I have a split personality, you know, I'm going crazy. And then all of a sudden, I apologized to her. I said, "Excuse me, doctor, I don't know why I said that." And then she said, "There's no need to apologize. How did you know I had one?" Okay. That occurred the very next day. Okay. Saturday, December 22nd, 2012. And on Sunday, that was with my father. And when I told him that Sunday, so 3 days in a row. And my father's experience was the most profound experience NDE experience of any book that I ever read, any case study. And it was on my way home that I put down my windows. I looked up at the stars, and for the first time in my life, I spoke to God and to these beings who I consider modern angels, intermediaries of God. Again, a non-religious God. Okay, the universal mind, and from that day on, I don't have a knowledge of spirituality. I have a knowingness of spirituality. So anyway, so at that point, after our research study, we can readily conclude that all of these phenomenon need to be studied and researched as one phenomenon. Okay, so over the many years since I had that first initial experience, I had been in communication with many academics, PhD academics, some of the major consciousness scholars. And so I would talk to these people because we had many PhD academics in the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation. One was Edgar Mitchell, the other one was Rudy Shields, the other one was Dr. John Climo. He knew all of the parapsychologists, John Climo out in California. He knew Russell Targ, Stanley Krippner, Dean Radin. Edgar Mitchell got Dean Radin to invite me to IONS to make a lecture out there. And I met Jacques Vallée. I mean, tons of people. And I would always be talking to these people about the nature of our reality. And universally, all of these individuals said, look, our consciousness is primary. Our reality is not what we think it is. Okay. That we're actually inside a greater reality. Okay. And then they would always say to me that all of the paranormal they hypothesize is actually one phenomenon. Why? Because consciousness is primary and needs to be studied as one phenomenon. But then I would ask them, how come you've never published a paper on that, but published anything academically on that? And they would all say, look, we have our hands filled with what we're focusing on. Like in Dean Radin is studying scientifically via experiments the psi phenomenon, and he said that what we were doing, he said we're like sister organizations, but he said what you're doing is you're much further ahead of us in terms of looking at the society at large of these issues. And so again, I'd be talking to more than 60 or 70 of these people, and they would all tell me the same thing, all these PhD academics. And then I said, look, we need to develop a similar research study that we did with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, but now we need to include everybody that's had an experience with the contact modalities. And so I decided at that point, we need to be able to introduce these topics via a book. And let me share my screen just to show you. I've been working on this for 4 years. Hold on a second here. I hope everyone can see this book, this front sheet here. The title of our book, let me, sorry about that. Let me get you the front cover. Okay, this is what the front cover looks like. The title of the book is A Greater Reality, the New Paradigm of Non-Local Consciousness, the Paranormal, and the Contact Modalities. And if you could see here to the left, you have all of these terms. They're all different aspects of the paranormal and the psi phenomenon. They're all being sucked up into a black hole. And as you can see, also being sucked up were binary codes, zeros and ones, which stands for the information fields of our reality. And the big major ones in capitalized letters are near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, UFOs, and ghosts and spirits. And a lot of people don't get this, but if you look at Nous in Greek, that means knowledge or wisdom. Okay, so Very few people catch that. We have 5 co-editors. Dr. Rudy Shields is an emeritus professor of astrophysics at Harvard University, now retired. Dr. John Climo was a professor for over 45 years in psychology, and his focus was primarily on consciousness and the paranormal. Michael Grosso is also an experiencer, together with John Climo. He, as a matter of fact, saw a huge UFO in Manhattan with his girlfriend and a neighbor. And he received a PhD in philosophy from Columbia University in the early 1970s. He's in his mid-70s now, and he's written about more than 10 books. Most of them deal with some aspects of the paranormal. And he's written many, many academic articles on consciousness. So that's Michael Grosso, Dr. Michael Grosso. Dr. Jeffrey Long is a medical doctor. He's an oncologist, and he's one of the world's leading researchers on near-death experiences. Okay. All of these individuals have written chapters for our book. And the title of the organization is CCRI, which stands for Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. And so let me now switch to the table of contents. Okay. We're going to be having 4 volumes. Okay, 4 books, each of them at least 500 pages in length, probably more. The first 2 volumes are theoretical in nature, and volumes 3 and 4 are written by experiencers of the contact modalities. And we chose individuals that have had 3 or more experiences via the contact modalities. For example, let me just shoot all the way down here to Dr. Melinda Greer. As you can see here, Dr. Melinda Greer is a medical doctor. She works in a hospital. She's a pediatrician, saving the lives of children. She has seen 12 UFOs. She's had 2 near-death experiences, several out-of-body experiences. She's had 3 Sasquatch encounters, 2 of them being up-close Sasquatch encounters. In terms of psychic abilities, she's like off the charts. And I could go on and on and on. She's, after her second NDE, she began to see ghosts of spirits in her hospital. So that's an example of an experiencer chapter that's going to be in our book. Now, in terms of the theoretical chapter, the prologue is written by Dr. Jeffrey Kripal, and he is a professor of religion and philosophy at Rice University, and he was one of the judges for the Bob Bigelow Consciousness Award, which was won by one of our authors. Down here, you'll see his name, Dr. Jeffrey Mishloff, right here. He's we have 2 chapters by him. And I'll go over them in a second. So he won $500,000. Okay, so this is not just chump change here. Okay, he won $500,000. We have 3 other people here that won prizes with the Bob Bigelow Consciousness Research Study, and I'll go over some of them. So Jeff Kripal was one of the award winners, and he's written many books relating to consciousness and the paranormal. And I think about 3 or 4 years ago, he wrote jointly a book with Whitley Strieber. And he also wrote a book about 2 years ago of this woman that had a major near-death experience. So he certainly understands that all the contact modalities should be studied as one phenomenon, and that consciousness is primary. I'm going to be writing the introduction for the book. I already spoke about Melinda Greer, and I put her up there because she is an example of what we're talking about, that all of these contact modalities need to be studied as one. So the next section, section 2, is titled The Primacy of Consciousness and the Contact Modalities. And here we have the very first article. Larry Dossey is a medical doctor. He's one of the most eminent writers on consciousness. He also, all of these people, everyone here holds that consciousness is primary. Dr. Bruce Grayson is now a retired professor at the University of Virginia School of Medicine. And for many years, he's been one of the top 3 academic researchers on near-death experiences. He actually was the one that really initiated. Raymond Moody led the charge of putting the name on it, but the actual academic research was done by Dr. Bruce Grayson and Dr. Kenneth Ring. Dr. Peter Sturrock is a professor of physics at Stanford University, has been very much interested in the topic of UFOs and consciousness for many, many years. So again, we're talking heavy-duty people. He was a professor of physics at Stanford University. Jim Tucker was another professor at the University of Virginia School of Medicine at the Division of Perceptual Studies, and he continued the research of Dr. Ian Stevenson, who founded the Institute of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia. And he continued with the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson on reincarnation. So just this first article, it's all heavyweights, okay? And the title of the article is Consciousness, What is it? Okay. The second article is by Dr. Tom Campbell. Actually, he doesn't have a PhD. I need to take the doctor away. He's like I am, ABD, all but dissertation. And he wrote a 70-page chapter that we live inside of virtual reality. And he arrived at these conclusions based upon 40 years of having out-of-body experiences. He worked at the very beginning with Robin Monroe at the Monroe Institute. So anyway, this is another heavy-duty article. Dr. Bob Davis is a retired professor of neuroscience, and he wrote, again, another chapter on what is consciousness. Dr. Larry Dawsey wrote, the medical doctor, wrote a title on The One Mind of Consciousness. And that article is based upon a book that he had written many years ago with the same title, The One Mind of Consciousness. Giorgio Piacenza is a philosopher, and he wrote a paper studying consciousness via integral theory, which is Ken Weber's theory of the nature of our reality and consciousness. William Trenote wrote a paper based upon the channeling of Paul Hamden by the Zeta race. And that chapter is titled The Extraterrestrial Cosmology of Consciousness. And that was written like an academic article, okay? But yet it came from the channeling from a Zeta. Dr. Jeffrey Mishloff, I interviewed him, and as I said before, he's probably one of the top 3 or 4 eminent academics on consciousness, and he's had this interview format where he's interviewed thousands of people on all aspects of consciousness over the last 40 years. And then our very own Michael Grosso, one of our co-editors, wrote an article titled Contact with Transcendent Mind. Again, that is a universal mind, which is the foundation of our reality. Now, the next topic is this topic titled Non-Local Consciousness, Telepathy, and the Quantum Hologram. And that is based upon the theories of the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell. We are publishing an article that he wrote that was only published one other place, and that was at Rudy Shields' Journal of Cosmology, which is a physics journal that got very minimal circulation, but yet that's Edgar's most important writing. It's a little bit difficult to read because it's couched in physics language, but it doesn't have physics in it. It's written for the layperson, but it's not an easy read. But yet that lays out the theory of non-local consciousness, how humans are able to tap into the information fields of our reality and to download that information. Common terminology uses the Akashic records, and how we're able to perceive the past, present, future, and how ESP works. So it's a very complicated theory, and he had worked with over 20 PhD physicists on that theory. Dr. Rudy Shields wrote a similar corollary to Edgar's theory titled Computer Model of Consciousness. And Dr. Glenn Ryan, who has a PhD in biochemistry from the University of London, he took Edgar's paper, and what he did is he applied it to contact with non-human intelligence, how people are having perceived experiences with various forms of non-human intelligence. So it's an application of Edgar's theory. And then Giorgio Piacenza, again, applied Edgar's theory to the theory of consciousness and the contact modalities. And Dr. Joseph Lewis wrote an article on Michael Talbot's book titled The Holographic Universe. And he wrote a summary of the holographic universe in a one chapter. And so the next topic is near-death experiences. And so we have Dr. Sharon Hewitt Rowlett. She is received a PhD in philosophy from New York University, and she was a philosophy professor. And she was a runner-up to the Bob Bigelow Consciousness Prize. She got $50,000 for this paper. So I communicated with her, and she agreed to have her paper published in this book. And her paper is titled The Best Evidence for the Survival of Human Consciousness, which is an excellent paper. It's written for the layperson, but yet it's written in an academic format, but yet digestible for everyone. Dr. Bruce Grayson wrote an overview of NDE research. And I said, he's the founder of NDE research. He's the man. He's the godfather of that. So we're publishing his article in there. And we're having a couple of more articles. One is by an interview with Dr. Jeffrey Long, who I said was one of the pioneers with Dr. Bruce Grayson on NDE research, and also Raymond Moody. I interviewed him as well at his home in Alabama, and we're publishing the transcription of that interview, which is mind-blowing with both of these individuals. These are pioneers of NDE research. And again, all of them say that consciousness is primary, that our physical 3D reality that we perceive via the 5 cognitive senses, that's an illusion, okay? And that all of what I call the paranormal, the contact modalities, that all of them need to be studied as one phenomenon, okay? So that's NDEs. Now for out-of-body experiences, remote viewing and consciousness, that's the next topic. We have, the first article is by Stephen A. Schwartz, and he pretty much, I think, is the best researcher on the topic of remote viewing. Not necessarily Russell Targ. I believe it's Stephen A. Schwartz. He developed what we now call non-coordinate remote viewing way before Russell Targ, and did it at the Stanford Research Institute. And he's been working on remote viewing until today. He's a man in his late 70s. So he wrote an article titled Through Time and Space, the Evidence for Remote Viewing. Next, we have Julia Sellers, whose husband is one of the world's major OBE experiencers. He could pop out of his body at will. So she's been researching this phenomenon again for over 20 years. And she did an overview of OBE research. What have academics and scientists and scholars written about the OBE phenomenon over the last 40 years? And then Marilyn Hughes, she's the president of the Out-of-Body Travel Foundation. She's been doing out-of-body national traveling, for over 40 years. And she has a wonderful website with hundreds of free books that she's published and articles. And she wrote an overview article titled OBEs, Astral Travel, and Remote Viewing. And again, these are all articles that were meant for the layperson. They're not highly technical, written, highly academic language, but yet it's written in a format that, you need to be able to pay attention to it. Now, Daniel Reskin wrote an article for us on lucid dreams. And again, that's a topic that's rarely discussed in the topic of consciousness, and it's important to introduce lucid dreams as one of the contact modalities. Then the next topic is ghost spirits and spiritual transformation. Gary Schwartz was a tenured professor at Harvard. He then was a tenured professor at Yale University, and for the last 20 years, he's been at the University of Arizona. And what he's been doing for the last 20 years? He's communicating with dead people, okay, via mediums. And this man is like one of the geniuses in this field of consciousness. He's published various books titled Expanding Science, Is Consciousness Primary, The God Experiments, many other books. So this guy is a genius. And we got an article that he wrote just for our book. Had never been published before. It's titled Survival of Consciousness Research. And then we have another article that Edgar Mitchell wrote. It's titled The Quantum Hologram, Merging of Science and Spirituality. The need for humanity to become much more spiritual because we're heading towards a path of self-destruction. So we need to be able to merge science and spirituality in order for the human civilization to continue. And Dr. Eric Ouellette is a professor in Canada, and he wrote an article about the history of Marian apparitions. This is where the Virgin Mary is seen all over the world, and talks about that from a paranormal, parapsychology perspective. Paul Eno is also a member of the CCRI, and he's one of the few non-academics that have written a chapter here. And Paul, I consider him to be one of the world's leading authorities on ghosts, poltergeists, and attachments, spiritual attachments, which he calls parasites. And so he wrote an article about his 50 years of research into this phenomenon. And it's an overview article. And then Reverend Michael Carter, who is also a major contact experiencer, he wrote a paper on the spiritual transformation that takes place upon the experiencer having contact via the contact modalities. So the spiritual transformation takes place via near-death experiences, via out-of-body experiences, via UFO contact experiences, via people that perpetually see ghosts and spirits and channeling, et cetera, et cetera. There's, a small percent of these people that, if they've done this for many, many years, that they're non-spiritual, okay? And the overwhelming majority become deeply spiritual people. So that's my Reverend Michael Carter's article. The next article is 2 academic papers on theogenic research, and that's articles on hallucinogens is another common term, on psilocybin, which is magic mushrooms, on DMT, which is the ingredient in ayahuasca, and so it's 2 articles discussing how the research of entheogens or hallucinogens reverts back to consciousness research and also contact with non-human intelligence. And so Dr. Christopher Timmerman's paper specifically looks at people that have used DMTs and the similarities with people that have had near-death experiences. Again, you see how all of this is lining up. Okay, the people that study nuts and bolts ufology are totally clueless of what I'm talking about. So hopefully over time that will change. And then we have this topic called UAPs, UFOs. And these are tons of articles relating to UFOs, okay? All of these people have a radically different perspective from the nuts and bolts approach, okay? I am presenting here chapter 1 from our book, Beyond UFOs, which actually has the data from our statistical research study. Carol Rainey was the ex-wife of Bud Hopkins, and she wrote an article, how the research of Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs on abduction research, all the numerous problems associated with that research. I won't go into those details. The late Brad Steiger, he wrote the conclusion for our book, Beyond UFOs, and he published more than 125 books on the paranormal, including UFOs and almost all the topics that I'm presenting in our paper. So we're including 2 of his papers that he wrote. One is 17 Theories for UFO Contact, and the other one was the conclusion for our book, Beyond UFOs. Dr. John Climo, who's one of our co-editors and one of the co-chairs of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Experiencer Research Study, he wrote a chapter that the so-called UFO occupants might be interdimensional beings that are residing in interdimensional realities. So Dr. Joseph Brooks has a similar hypothesis, is that the UFO contact phenomenon is actually a phenomenon that can best be described via a virtual reality, and that these experiences are holographic experiences, which is a theory that I share as well. Okay. Then we have a Chinese experiencer. She didn't want her name published because she might have problems with the Chinese authorities. But she talks about the whole aspect of ufology and the paranormal in China, in mainland China. And then we have Brent Rains, who's been also a member of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, who's been researching the paranormal and ufology for over 50 years now. He wrote a paper on John Keel, who's one of the first ufologist researchers to incorporate the paranormal and psychic aspects of the UFO contact phenomenon. So his paper is John Keel and his theory of UAPs and the paranormal. Then Dr. Massimo Todorani, he's also a PhD astrophysicist. He's a professor of astrophysics in Italy. And he wrote another paper also about the UAP phenomenon from a multidimensional perspective. Dr. Charles Emmons has been writing about UFOs for over 40 years, and he's now in his late 70s, I would say, and he wrote a paper about the connection between UAPs, the paranormal, and consciousness. Dr. Michael Grosso, as I said before, one of our co-editors, retired professor of philosophy, wrote a paper about UFOs, psychical research, and religion. And Dr. John Alexander wrote a paper about UAPs and the contact modalities. He says that we need to study all of the contact modalities as one phenomenon. And he also agrees that consciousness is primary, just like all these other individuals. Finally, in that section, I have an interview with George Knapp, one of the hosts of Coast to Coast. And the same thing, consciousness is primary. All of the contact modalities are one phenomenon that needs to be studied as one. He's totally against materialist mainstream ufology, studying Roswell for the 4,000th time, Rendlesham Forest again. He says that focus is not going to take you anywhere, that we need to be able to focus on consciousness and interdimensional consciousness research of the UFO contact phenomenon. So then I have two articles here which are proposals of future research. One is an article that I wrote of what can be done to be able to study the relationship between consciousness and the contact modalities. And that's like a formal proposal of how to do this research. And Dr. Raul Valverde and Chet Swanson. Raul is a professor of information sciences at a major university in Canada, and he wrote a proposal of how to do an academic research study of, first of all, the NDE phenomenon, and then comparing the NDE phenomenon with UFO research and OBEs. And so he's an information guy, a statistician. So that's that proposal. And then we have various articles that are like wraparound articles, conclusion articles. One is Dennis Briefer, who is a physicist, an engineer, and also a member of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation. He was also the president of the John Mack Institute after Dr. John Mack passed away. Then we have an article by Gary Schwartz and Dr. Mario Beauregard. Dr. Mario Beauregard is also a professor at the University of Arizona. He's a neuroscientist by training. And I mentioned previously Gary Schwartz. And they have arguments for a post-materialist science and consciousness, which is basically an argument that consciousness is primary. And then Stephen A. Schwartz talks about Thomas Kuhn, who is a professor of sociology at Stanford University, and he mentioned how the thesis of paradigms change over time in the field of science, how basically you have to wait till the dinosaurs die off for a new theory, a new paradigm to be established. So he applied that to the theory of consciousness as being primary, which is, again, an academic article, very sophisticated, well-written, meant for the sophisticated audience members, but yet digestible for everyone. And then we ended off by an article by one of our co-editors, and as I said, my dear friend and co-director, together with myself, of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, Dr. John Climo, and he wrote about how the fields of psychology and psychiatry have to change to accommodate the experiencers of the contact modalities. Because now you go to a shrink, they'll diagnose you as, bipolar or schizophrenic, or they invent some other disease and give you pills. Because, for example, if I were to take some of these diagnostic tests that you take for having these experiences, I took one of those sample surveys, and I was labeled, you name it, I was a crazy madman, and they would have given me tons of pills and medications because of my illnesses. Okay, so what he's saying is that these experiences are very, very real, and because of that, psychology and psychiatry have to change to be able to accommodate the experiencers of the contact modalities. So that's what our book is all about. And now let me stop sharing and go back to my screen. And again, the title of the book is A Greater Reality, the New Paradigm of Non-Local Consciousness, the Paranormal, and the Contact Modalities. So I'm here open for questions.
I think we might be out of time. Are we out of time?
Okay.
Now?
Let's get one question in, Ray. Let's see what we got here.
Great.
I had a lot to present, so I apologize for not leading.
No apology needed, man. You're amazing. Thank you so much for everything. Let's see what we got. I think we mostly have comments about how amazing your information is. Alan, you have something particular you want to ask Ray?
Yeah, so Ray, you have this great evolution from beyond UFOs to consciousness. What's next? What happens when we get to the level that you're presenting? What do you see the progression?
Well, I've been working for the last 5 years on a documentary. Most of these people that you see on that list, we've interviewed them together with 70 experiencers. I didn't go over that chapter. There's 2 books just on the experiencers. And so we interviewed close to 70 people as well. So we're doing a documentary which is a combination of science and the experiencer. Okay, and to do it in a way which respects the experiencer of the contact modalities, but we're presenting it in terms of consciousness and the nature of reality. So, and we have these 2 remarkable individuals that did 10 documentaries for William Shatner. They are the co-producers. They also did In Search of Spock, which is the Leonard Nimoy tribute. So these are, very reputable people that are doing this. And the wife is a major experiencer. And he's an experiencer himself, but he just had one minor experience of having 6 hours of missing time, where they left Chichen Itza, and all of a sudden, 6 hours later, they were in the hotel room fully clothed and the car properly parked. But the wife has had a lot of experiences. So that's the next step. And what I really would like to do is hopefully when I retire soon, to be able to actually do the academic research that I talked about in the proposal, which is to have a better understanding of all the experiencers that are appearing on the show today.
That would be great. You know what's so great about Ray and Jenna and some people, it hasn't been a lifelong study. It's like, boom, overnight, they're in the new consciousness. I think that is possible. I think we're building a conscious field of the 100th monkey, the potential where suddenly it tips. And now suddenly it's like, of course, there are things out there. There's intelligences. What made us think there wasn't? So
yeah, I just want to leave food for thought for everyone. I start off my chapter by saying that we're in a time period of a grand awakening of humanity. And I also raised this question. I said, do you think it's a coincidence that 3 of the major contact modalities, that is the topic of UFOs, NDEs, and OBEs, all got circulated on a worldwide basis within 5 years of each other? Okay. NDEs was 1975. Robert Monroe with OBEs, that was 1972. Star Trek was syndicated in 1970 around the world. Both Robert Monroe's book and Raymond Moody's book got circulated and translated into all the languages of the world. Now, this is before the internet for you young folks that are out there, okay? So was it a coincidence that all of a sudden, within 5 years of each other, 3 out of the 4 major contact modalities were circulated all around the world? So I argue that no, the time is right now why this was introduced to humanity. And the reason is because we've reached the point of self-annihilation. Okay. Via ecological catastrophes and also nuclear weapons. Okay. We could destroy our planet completely and wipe ourselves off. So we're given what do they call a reprieve? Okay. To be able to become more spiritual, to understand that we are eternal spiritual beings. And I think that my project, together with the project of many, many other people, the work that you're doing, Neil, Alan, and the other speakers that we heard today, we're all part of the same force, the same process to awaken humanity.
Yeah. No, thank you. Brilliant.
Thank you, brother.
You've made a huge impact on the field, Ray, and keep going. You know, we need you.
Thank you. I apologize because I'm losing my eyesight. I have very bad eyes. I thought
you were crying because you were so emotional about the presentation.
No, I was told I was going to go blind, soon. So my eyes, I need to constantly put water and tears in my eyes. So
no, take care of yourself and look.
And I am crying for humanity, so.
Of course. Yeah.
Appreciate you, brother. Everyone. Thank you so much for coming, man.
Okay, thank you. Bye, everyone.
All right.
So